All right, so I wasn't planning on making this video tonight, but I'm gonna go ahead and do it because I can't resist the urge. Um, this isn't the video I've been talking about. This happens to be an article that I came across on the internet today, and it's by a lady named Jennifer Bucholtz. Just to give you a rundown of some of her experience, she is a U.S. Army counterintelligence agent and a decorated veteran of the Iraq-Afghanistan War. She holds a Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice, Master's of Arts in Criminal Justice, Master of Science in Forensic Science, and a whole bunch of other crap. And she has some very good points in this article. She has some points that I'm going to give my opinion on why I think she got it wrong completely on some of these things. I believe this article was wrote January 2016. It's 33 pages long. Definitely not reading it. We're going to hit on the main points that I got issues with. Now, like I said, she makes some good points. All right. So, for instance, when talking about the bullet, she says originally there was only one photograph of item FL. No side view of the bullet was released at the time this article was written. Therefore, any damage to the bullet cannot be analyzed. She says that this bullet was positively linked to the rifle found in Avery's house, meaning it was fired from the same rifle. No doubt about that. She says the bullet reportedly had Halbach's DNA on it, but this evidence should not have been admissible in court because the control sample was contaminated by the forensic analyst. Despite the contamination deeming the evidence inadmissible, a one-time exception to the rule was filed by the analyst and granted by the court. So we all know about that, but here she is giving her opinion, and this lady seems to be, I would say, in the middle of the issue, probably leaning towards Stephen Avery's guilty, but at the same time acknowledging problems with the forensics in this case. So she says, I thought that was a very good point that, she admits that really was an anomaly, that evidence really shouldn't have been admitted into court because the control, the sample was contaminated by the forensic analyst. So I thought that was interesting. Another good point I thought she made was if Halbach was shot multiple times in the head in Avery's garage, there should have been evidence of high velocity blood splatter. The absence of blood evidence in the garage suggests she might have been shot elsewhere or not at all. I totally agree with that statement. I've been preaching that from day one, and so has a lot of other people. When referring and talking about the key, she says the key was found in Avery's house. This is the most questionable piece of evidence against Stephen Avery introduced at trial. Much controversy surrounds the discovery, as the previous times the investigators searched the trailer, it was never found, blah, blah, blah. We know the whole story. But then she goes on to say about the key that it was that she thinks that Stephen Avery could have cleaned the key off and the keychain and then accidentally put his DNA back on it. Well, you don't clean the key and accidentally put the abnormally high amount of DNA that was back on the key. If he accidentally touched it for 1 second or something after he cleaned it, that's one thing. But Kathleen Zellner said, and her experts have said, that it's an abnormal amount of DNA on the key. So that's one of the issues that I take with the, what she mentions about the key. She goes on to start talking about the blood in the RAV. And she says that Stephen Avery's blood was positively identified in 6 locations throughout the Hallbox car. These locations include to the right of the ignition, on both front seats, on a seated case, and near the front passenger seat. Okay, and then she said it is known that Avery had a cut on his right middle finger when police questioned him on November 5th. Well, Andy Colburn testified that when he went to talk to Stephen Avery, that he didn't notice a cut on the finger. So whether or not it was there when Colburn questioned him, that's, to be determined, or maybe it has been determined, but so I don't find that necessarily as a key factor in the blood being in the car, especially as it pertains to, Teresa Hallbach's death. Now, one of the issues I have, she says that hundreds of fragments of Hallbach's bones were found in a burn pit approximately 20 feet behind Avery's garage. I don't know the exact number, but I didn't think it was hundreds of bone fragments. Maybe it was. I know there was a bunch of small ones, so maybe it was maybe 800. I didn't think there was hundreds. So that's something that I found interesting. Then she says, to her, that's a big deal. She's saying that the fact that the bones were found there, and according to what the experts said, that's reason for her to believe that Stephen Avery was guilty. She goes on to say that the defense postulated that her body was burned elsewhere and transported back to the fire pit next to Avery's house in order to frame him. She goes on to say, however, the distribution of bones and ashes suggests otherwise. If the burn remains of her body had been somehow transported to Avery's pit, they would have been more haphazardly dispersed when found. So this I took, and like I said, this lady has the credentials. Okay, I don't have the credentials, but what I do have is common sense, and I got a set of eyeballs, and I'm going to put my opinion on her statements. And if you don't like my opinion, you don't have to watch my video. There's been a couple of people, not many, but a couple people that take issue with some of the things I say. I always let my viewers know that it's my opinion. If you don't like my opinion, you don't have to watch my damn channel. So you can go somewhere else. You can go talk about your alternative facts or something. But she goes on to say that they would have been more haphazardly dispersed when found. Well, here's my issue with that. Lady, how much more haphazardly dispersed do you want them to be dispersed? Because to my understanding, there's only 10%. Let's just call it 20% for the heck of it. Let's say that Kathleen Zellner and her experts are being conservative. Let's say 20%. Okay, 20% of the bones were found in Stephen Avery's burn pit, supposedly, because there was no pictures of them being taken out of there one by one, laid on a sheet, and the whole thing that's supposed to happen, like the forensic anthropologist that I spoke with. None of that happened. So let's assuming that they were in the burn pit. First of all, they was playing it. Second of all, only 20% of them were there. So she talks about haphazardly dispersed. When found, they would have been more haphazardly dispersed. Lady, there's bones, 3 piles of bones or sets of bones on Manitowoc County's property. There's bones in the quarry. There's bones in a burn barrel. There's bones scattered throughout the grass. How much more haphazardly dispersed do they have to be in order for you to see that the bones and the burn site couldn't have been behind Stephen Avery's house? Furthermore, in my opinion, and I can only go off from go off of from what I've seen in pictures, etc., she talks about the ash is consistent with a body being burned there in a big fire. No, it wasn't. I mean, using Kathleen Zellner's expert for a second, he said the lack of ash around that burn pit tells him that that was not the primary burn location. Common sense tells me anybody that's ever made a huge fire can understand this. There's no ash. There's not enough ash. I mean, we're talking about a van seat, all these tires, branches, wood, I mean, a whole bunch of stuff, and there's not ash to support all of this taking place, in which a body would have to burn for hours and hours. You would have to fuel this fire for hours, for that to be believable. For, to have that destruction on the body, you would have to have way more ash. So that's just my opinion. Now she goes on, and I am going to read most of this section here because it's kind of important. This is her hypothesis of the murder. This is how she thinks it went down. Okay, and I know most of y'all know because most of my viewers are extremely smart, but just in case you don't know, a hypothesis means an educated guess. So this is her educated guess. Okay. She says, based on the forensic evidence against Stephen Avery, one theory of what happened on October 31st, 2005 formed in my mind. Avery may have lured Halbach into his home under the disguise of needing to pay her. A confrontation of some sort occurred, or Avery simply took his victim by surprise when her back was turned. Avery may have hit her in the head with something, rendering her unconscious. The blunt force trauma could have resulted in a bleeding head wound, which led to her having blood in her hair. With her unconscious, Avery may have placed her on his bed and sexually assaulted her or stabbed her, as alleged by the prosecution based on information provided by Dassey, which he later recanted. So let's stop right there for a second. First of all, no evidence of anything that Brendan Dassey said that he said happened in the trailer. There's no evidence of that. There's no blood found with luminol. There's no wear marks on the bedpost where handcuffs had somebody strung up. There's no blood on the mattress. He didn't hit her with anything in the trailer because there was no cast off blood splatter or minute little spots of blood. None of that is in there. So then she goes on to say, there's no evidence against Stephen Avery of sexual assault. However, because Halbach's body was burned to a point where no foreign DNA could be extracted, to remove her from the house, Avery may have wrapped up Halbach's body in the comforter from his bed. When police conducted their search of his house, the bed was absent of any sheets, pillowcases, or comforter. Carrying her out of the house in the comforter, which would have served at least two purposes for Avery. Now, I asked this question earlier, and I think it's important to note that, in my opinion, when the cops showed up at Stephen Avery's house and, originally and said, hey, we're looking for Teresa Halbach. We haven't seen her. She's missing, blah, blah, blah. Do you mind if we take a look around your property? Before they had any warrants, he let law enforcement go through his trailer. So trained law enforcement looking for a missing person, you're going to go through this house, see if anything's out of the normal. Well, it seems to me that if he didn't have sheets and comforter on the bed in that initial search, that was something that would be top priority to be remembered and brought up in court against Stephen Avery. So understand that when you're going through a trailer, you're trained, cops, and you know that this is the last place that she was supposedly seen. So when you're going through a trailer, you're going to look for things, signs of a struggle. You're going to look for blood. You're going to look for anything that's out of the normal. If you go into master bedroom of Stephen Avery's trailer and he doesn't have any sheets, pillowcases, or comforters, to me, that would stand out. So the fact that was not mentioned, to me, tells me he had sheets on the bed when they initially searched his house. So then she goes on to say, to remove her from the house, blah, 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 carrying her out might serve two purposes. Now, she goes on to say that if she was bleeding on the comforter, it would absorb the blood potentially and not go through the comforter and get to the mattress. That's possible. I'll give you that. I mean, that's probably possible. But if all of the other things surrounding that event happened, then there would definitely be blood that Stephen Avery missed. He missed some spot of his own blood that wasn't from any murder in there beside the washing machine. So, I mean, you try to say that Stephen Avery can clean up all this blood, but yet he left his own blood in the trailer from a different event, in the garage from a different event, and in his Grand Prix from a different event. So, no, it doesn't make sense. And then she says that the comforter could have been used to disguise the body. And what she essentially says in this article, well, I'll just read it. She says there's a possibility Avery carried her body out of his house during hours of daylight and placed her body in the back of her vehicle. Now, remember, according to this expert, she's saying that Teresa Halbach's car is over there by the red van at this point. And I'm not sure, how many of y'all remember, but from that spot to the trailer is 70 feet at least. I'd be willing to bet it's about 85 feet. So she's saying that Stephen Avery wraps Teresa Halbach up in this comforter and packs her in broad daylight 75 feet and puts her in back of the car. Okay. To me, that makes absolutely no sense. You have to, anybody could, Mama Avery could drive up on you at any second in the golf cart. I mean, there's so many possibilities of getting caught. That seems absurd to me. She says that Teresa approximately weighed 135 pounds and Avery may have had difficulty carrying her body, resulting in him placing the body in the rear of the vehicle in order to move it into his garage. See, this doesn't make sense. She's saying that first he lured her into the trailer, and then all of a sudden she's saying that he had to carry her away from the garage to put her in back of the car, then to bring the body to the garage. The garage closer than the RAV was, lady. Reportedly, the comforter from Avery's bed was burned, according to Dassey, leaving no trace of it or any blood that might have been on it. Once in the garage, Avery allegedly removed Halbach's body from the vehicle in his garage and shot her several times, even though she just said herself there was no evidence of that. He may have covered her head with a portion of the comforter to make the act psychologically easier for him. Yeah, because after you smash somebody in the head, stab them, cut their throat, rape them, tie them up, beat them, cut their hair off and all that, you don't have the stomach to shoot them in the head. So you want to put the comforter over her head to make it psychologically easier on Avery to shoot her. No, that's absurd. Okay. The bullet still would have likely created holes in the blanket, causing some blood to leak through. Luminol tests of the garage show multiple areas of blood that have been cleaned up, though those blood stains could not be identified as Halbach's. The use of oxygen bleach versus chlorine bleach will degrade DNA to a point where it cannot be identified as belonging to a particular person. Oxygen bleach is a common household cleaning agent. After the killing, Avery likely moved Halbach's body to the fire pit. He gathered up the tires and old bench seat out of the van, pieces of wood and other random items. He used items to start and maintain a large bonfire for several hours, during which Halbach's body was destroyed, and nobody smelled it. Scott Taddock was over there. Bobby Dassey was over there. Bobby at some point was leaving the house. Barb at some point was over there. There was no residue or stench still in the soil, and nobody reported any smells in that area. So that part is, to me, absolutely absurd. Just like the bones, that her theory on that is absolutely absurd. He used a shovel found by the burn pit to stir the fire, resulting in complete burning and breakage of Hallbach's bones. The arson investigator who testified in court found that, based on the burn patterns of the bones, it appeared that the fire pit was the location where the body was burned. Wrong. We done discussed that. There was only 10 to 20% of her bones found in the burn pit. And there was not enough ash to support a bonfire for that many hours. And it just didn't happen. They didn't take pictures of the bones being taken from the burn pit. They didn't mark them, document them, all that. They scooped it all up with a skid steer and shovels and rakes and all this crap and brought it to a lab and sifted it out. That's completely not how it's supposed to be done. They had experts testified in court to that, and the one that I spoke with myself in generalized questioning, not about this case, just asking him questions on how it's supposed to be done. They did it completely wrong, and they did it completely wrong for a reason. So this is some of her, this is a lot of this is her theory, and then some of this is her expert opinion. So another thing I want to take issue with is that she says blood seeped through the glove he was wearing, leaving transfer stains in 6 places in her car. Okay. Assuming that Stephen Avery was guilty, okay, but there's one problem with this statement that she made, and being that she's so highly qualified, seems like she would have been able to say this in the correct terminology, because she said there were 6 transfer stains in the RAB. No, there was not, because the stain in the door jamb was not a transfer stain. That was a passive blood drop. Transfer stain is when you touch something and you're transferring the blood from your hand or body or whatever onto the item. A passive blood drop is when you get drips. You have an active bleeder, and so the spot in that door jamb is a passive blood drop. It is not a transfer blood stain. Now, I can confidently present that to you as a fact. You can look that up for yourself. You can look at Making a Murderer. Kathleen Zellner's expert shows you the difference in the documentary. Now, I already talked about how she said he accidentally left his DNA on the key, cleaned it, and then accidentally put an abnormal high amount of DNA back on the key. Now, she goes on to say, and like I said, she did make some good points in the beginning of this article. She talks about how there would have been blood splatter in the garage, high velocity splatter. Oh, here's one I wanted to bring up. Because like I said, this article is 33 pages long. There's no way I could read all of this. I thought this was interesting. She says 2 skull fragments belonging to Hallbach were found in Avery's burn pit. Both showed evidence of beveling on the inner side of the skull portions, which can result from being penetrated by a bullet. It can also be caused by blunt force trauma, such as being hit with a hammer. Okay, I'm not an expert. I'm not presenting this as fact. But in my opinion, maybe there's an item that you could be hit with blunt force trauma that might cause a similar bevel to what was shown on the skull fragment, but a hammer is not consistent with the bevel that was on the skull fragment. Judging by like 1,000 episodes of Forensic Files that I've watched, the skull fragment was very consistent with a gunshot wound. It looks like an entrance wound of a gunshot. The expert said it was. Now, who shot her and what caliber of gun shot her can be debated amongst experts out in the forensic community, but I can pretty confidently say, in my own opinion, that the bevel shown on the skull fragment was 1,000% not caused by a damn hammer. Because if you smack somebody in the head with a hammer, that's going to be more consistent with fracturing. Like, it's going to bust the damn skull all up. It's not going to leave a little bevel like that, unless you got a micro hammer, an ice pick or something. And then, like I said, she did make some good points. She said if Halbach was shot multiple times in the head in Avery's garage, there should be evidence of high velocity blood splatter. The absence of blood evidence in the garage suggests she might have been shot elsewhere or not at all. Now, she says much debate has occurred on how Avery's blood was found in the vehicle, but none of his fingerprints were. I thought that was another good point that she made. None of his fingerprints were found. I postulate that he was wearing gloves. So her opinion is that he was wearing gloves during the murder or while picking up debris to burn in the fire, but unknowingly cut himself through the glove. This would have allowed blood to escape without leaving fingerprints. I'm not sure. Well, I know all of y'all have. Maybe this lady hasn't. But we've all seen the gash in Stephen Avery's finger, right? Pretty deep gash. Like, it looked like it hurt like hell. So she's saying he unknowingly cut himself on his finger, and that would allow the blood to escape without leaving fingerprints. This lady, she must have never cut herself ever, like shaving or at any point chopping onions in the kitchen, because I guarantee you, unless Stephen Avery was cracked out on crystal or something, he was going to feel that cut whenever it happened. I guarantee you. So to me, I mean, this article, and y'all can find it. I want to say this article is, I want to say it was written January 2016 in publicsafety.com. I don't even know how I came across it, but when I started reading through it, I said, this lady has lost her freaking mind. But you feel free to pull it up. Like I said, it's 33 pages long. I'm not going to sit here and read all of it, but to me, it is filled with things that don't make sense and inconsistencies. And we had a discussion about this earlier in a Facebook group, but talking about the bones were intertwined with steel cables from several car tires, evidence used by specially trained arson investigators and anthropologists to back up their testimony at Dassey's trial. Well, we wouldn't know that they were intertwined in steel cables because they didn't document and photograph everything 100% like they were supposed to. So I guess we just have to take their word for that. But the fact that she thinks half of this crap that she's saying could be true absolutely blows my mind, because there's errors all throughout this article. I don't even know if this is fake news or what. I mean, I don't know. I mean, her credentials look legit, but some of the crap she's saying is absolutely crazy. She says, to this day, Avery maintains he was framed by Manitowoc Sheriff's Department due to a previous false conviction for a rape in 1985. Avery was awarded $400,000 by the department. The false arrest and imprisonment resulted in a black eye for many employees in the local criminal justice system. He feels this bad publicity led them to framing him for Halbach's murder, specifically by planting his blood in her vehicle, a bullet in his garage, and her car key in his bedroom. Avery used the compensation from the previous case to hire two prominent lawyers to defend him in 2005. Avery's defense insinuated someone on the investigative team planted the key. somebody absolutely planted the key. I mean, that shouldn't even be a question. Avery's any scenario is a possibility. However, this theory would indicate that the person who planted the key, the bullet, and Avery's blood was involved in Halbach's death. Not necessarily. Possible. It's possible that somebody, one of the police officers, could kill Teresa and do all this. That's not outside the realm of a possibility. But what's more possible, what's more probable, would be that somebody else killed her, maybe dumped her body in car in Cuss Row. Cops found it, said, hey, Avery was the last person to see this girl. It's right by our house. We know this scumbag did it because they already hate him. We're just going to boost the evidence right on over here, and because he's trying to hide it and trying to get away with it, that's not going to happen this time. Oh, and by the way, this will also help us out in that $36 million lawsuit. She says, it is hard to conceive and highly unlikely that several law enforcement officers would be willing to engage in murder and subsequent cover-up. Yeah, I can understand where that might seem highly unlikely in most circumstances, but first of all, it wouldn't take several police officers to pull this off. And cops murder people all the time. I mean, I'm not an anti-cop person. First of all, let's get that straight. I'm 100% for the police. I think 90% of them, I have family members, a long line of family members of police officers in my family, distant relatives, etc. So I'm not against police officers, but have we not seen in recent years via body cams, cell phones, all this technology coming about, have we not seen some of these cases where police officers gun people down? Now, I'm not talking about the Michael Brown case because that wasn't the cop's fault. Michael Brown absolutely grabbed that gun, tried to grab that police officer's gun. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the situation where the guy was running from the cop and he didn't know somebody was over there filming it. And just because the cop got tired of chasing this guy, he pulls out his gun and pops like 9 rounds into the back of this guy. So it's not outside of all possibility that just because you're a police officer mean that you can't commit crimes like this, or you can't commit murder, especially when you have a lot riding on who goes down for the murder. It's hard to conceive and highly unlikely that several law enforcement officers will be willing to engage in a murder and subsequent cover-up. Alternatively, they may have felt there was enough circumstantial evidence implicating Avery in her death, which is what I just spoke about, but wanted to ensure he was convicted. In order to do this, they must have had access to her car key in order to plant it in his home. I mean, obviously, they would have to have access to the car key to plant it in his home. And then one last thing about this article before I wrap this up in a second. She goes on to talk about the blood in the RAV, and she admits that even if EDTA was in the blood, that it was possible, she says in this article, that it was possible that EDTA was in the bloodstains but was undetected by the FBI, as did the expert that Buting and Strain called. She said the same thing. Essentially what she said was, if you find it, that's a good indication that it's there. Duh. If you don't find it, she said, I can't tell the difference if I didn't find it because it was not there, or if it was there, but it was not a large enough amount for the test to detect. So she brings up good points. And then on the other hand, she brings up points that are below her credentials, like common sense things that doesn't even make sense. And I know a lot of y'all was late getting to this video, so feel free to go back and start from the beginning and watch so you can have a better understanding of what this video was about. I was going to do it tomorrow, and I couldn't contain myself. I just had to go ahead and do it. I didn't care, how many people initially viewed it or whatever. I wanted to go ahead and do it because I thought it was an interesting article. Thursday, either tomorrow night or Thursday, the legend Thomas Myrtle is going to be coming on. We're going to be doing Mysteries of Manitowoc episode 4. Hopefully it's either tomorrow or Thursday. I'm not sure which one, but that's going to be interesting. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about leading back to the other video that I hinted to a couple of days ago. And that's going to be about it for today. That's mainly what I wanted to cover was this absurd article that this lady wrote. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, which I'm sure most of you watching has, go ahead and do so, please. If not, share this video, subscribe, like, whatever you want to do. If you have a good comment, leave it in the comment section. If you have a comment that I'm not going to like, don't bother leaving it because I'm probably just going to cuss you out. So y'all have a good day and good evening, good night's sleep, and I'll probably see y'all either tomorrow night or Thursday night.